thanks so much for joining me today, Adam.
Always a pleasure.
It's lovely to see you. So I just wanted to kick it off because obviously you are a presenter on BBC Radio Bristol on BBC Upload, and you almost in your sort of your job description, you champion new music or new creativity, new artists. And I wanted to know sort of what gives you the most joy from your job as a broadcaster?
Oh wow, that's a deep question because I get so much joy from a couple of things. I get joy from speaking to the people that I'm championing and having a chat with them on air and allowing them to have the platform, really, because the whole thing with Upload is the show's not about me. It's not about me and my ego at all. It's about the people that I'm championing, so I love to sort of speak to people on air and give them the space to sort of bang their own drum, really, because I realised that I'm in quite a privileged position to have my own show on the BBC. So, handing the airwaves over to people for a bit to sort of champion what they're doing is what I love doing. The little joys that I love getting are the bits when people sort of show their gratitude. Because for me, handing that over, it's like, well, why wouldn't I? Why wouldn't I give you the space? Why wouldn't I champion your stuff? Because what you're doing is good, right? So, there's a guy actually who I made my track of the week, and I'm looking down here to my phone because he sent me an Instagram message, which is like a voice note the other week, when I made him track of the week, and he was so buzzing the fact that I'd made him track of the week, and I didn't tell him beforehand that he was track of the week, and he sent me this little voice note saying, "You have no idea how gassed I am at the fact that you've made me track of the week, that you've sort of championed me, and it's enabled me to sort of think about what I can do next, because I've never had anyone really have that belief in me before." And for me, it was a real simple sort of action of like, this track's banging, I need to make it track of the week because it's great. But for him, it meant the world. And he posted a little Instagram story video of him and his mum in the kitchen being like, "Come on, let's track of the week. Let's go get the Prosecco open." And they had like a little celebration. And for me, seeing that is the joy that I get out of my job, is sort of seeing the joy in others.
Oh, that's amazing. Yeah. Well, I mean, I know I've said this to you before, but I can double down on that as having been featured. And honestly, the appreciation to even spend as much time, give it, like, you get. We've talked about this before, but just briefly mentioning that you gave it like an hour or so to when I released my EP, and to talk to you live on air and stuff, and to actually go into like the nuance of everything, kind of like, tell me about that song, tell me, that as an artist trying to sort of find your way through is such an amazing thing, because you feel like you're just giving snapshots into the world most of the time because it's Instagram, or it's just a quick like thing. And
having that sort of ability to do those longer form things is really important, I think, because quite often when you do radio interviews, if you'll know from listening to different radio stations, and let's take for instance something like Radio 1, for instance, they might get an artist on and it'll be, okay, here's a new single, bam bam bam, what have you been up to, you got your new tour, okay, you're right, next. Okay, because a lot of people's sort of attention span is so short. And you mentioned things like social media. We're so used to now, like, if we're not interested, scroll. But I will always champion people on a sort of a much lengthier basis. So for instance, with you and your EP, giving that space to breathe to the EP so that people can hear it in full and hear you talking through those tracks. Is brilliant, because there's no real other space that certainly within broadcast, traditional broadcast, whether that be TV or radio, that can do that apart from the BBC, and sort of having the ability to bang the drum for people in that sort of long form. And it's great for me to be able to champion you guys, but for you guys to have that platform as well and make the most out of it yourselves is huge.
Because I can say and I imagine this for a lot of other artists, is that you always have this vision in your head of how things can be, in the sense of what you're making. So my EP is a vision in my head of like how I want it to be. And I could talk for hours probably about it. I could just go on and like be really, I could go into all the nuance and the detail of it. But
well, it's your baby, right?
In essence, yeah, it is, because you spend so much time laboring over all the parts, and not in like a kind of cliched way. It's all individual to everybody in what they kind of labor over, but like, there is definitely a whole kind of element of spending so much time on it and then releasing it to the world, and that's quite a big scary thing. And you want to go, oh, let me tell you about this, but really.
And did you notice that little detail in the second time that I repeated that? And it's.
Did you hear the snare on that second verse? Because that was so good.
But you know all the nuances of all that, and that's why it's great to speak to you in depth about that sort of stuff, or whoever it is that's creating stuff, to be able to get all those little details that perhaps as a casual listen you'd never have picked up on, but you sort of go, oh, I've got an appreciation for that now. And in the same way with you, with your EP, when people come and speak to me about Upload, Upload's my baby. I started at BBC Radio Bristol. It's now gone right the way across the country, and we've done so many exciting things. I've got sort of red face today because I was out filming on a farm yesterday for Upload Festival, which is coming up shortly. And I was just like, any chance that I can get to sort of buzz about Upload, because that is my baby, in the same way that you can buzz about your EP and whatever other projects that you will work on. I'm so invested in everything. So for me to sort of be able to go, hey, we've got this great thing, much like you did with your EP, it's, you sort of love shouting about what you create, don't you?
So when we, we've spoken sort of in between our last, when I was on with you, probably it was October, November time now. But there was, we started talking a bit about mental health, and I was really interested in some of your responses to some of my lyrics or the songs that kind of what I had really hoped that it would somehow maybe kickstart something in someone's head about maybe their own life or things about their own mental health. And I wanted to ask a question around that, and sort of, because it's something I've been thinking a lot for myself. But how much value do you put on your own mental health in your day-to-day?
Probably not enough. And that's me sort of, confession time, nowhere near enough to what I perhaps should do. And that sort of played out quite sort of evidently for me a few, probably coming up to 2 months ago now, when sort of start of February, because I'd had so much, stuff through the last 12 months, through all the coronavirus pandemic, through working extended hours to make sure that my show got on air, and then my show getting extended, and then to 4-hour show rather than a 3-hour show. And I do all this stuff like on my own. I don't have a producer. I don't have, any sort of help supporting to set up the program. It's sort of all on my shoulders. And then I hadn't really had chance to sort of take much leave last year, because I think same for a lot of people, anyone that was, lucky enough to stay in work and not be sort of laid off or anything like that, or put on furlough, sort of thought, well, I'm just going to carry on working, because I can't go anywhere. I can't go on holiday. I can't go camping or whatever. So I can't go and see my mates on my annual leave. So I sort of just kept on working through, and it got to sort of February, and it sort of hit me, and I was in a real bad place. I wasn't enjoying my work, which is not like me at all, because I love what I do. And, it was silly stuff like I would sit and scroll through social media on my days off. So on a Saturday or a Sunday, I'd be in bed until sort of 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And I was like, what the heck am I doing with my life?
Yeah.
And I just wasn't looking after myself. I wasn't looking after my mental health, and taking the time to sort of reflect on what a busy year it had been, and all that sort of stuff. So the honest answer is I don't take enough care of my mental health. But I had quite a lot of annual leave to use up, so I took up 2 blocks of 2 weeks. So I had 2 weeks off, then 2 weeks back at work, and then another 2 weeks off. And since having that time where I was able to go back and see my parents, because I live on my own, so I bubble with my parents, so I could go and see them. So I spent a week with them each time I was off, and then I had a week of just doing absolutely jack all. So I did absolutely nothing. I binge watched Line of Duty from the start. My mate gave me his Disney Plus login. Thank you very much, Andy, for that. So I sort of like just spent a lot of time doing things that didn't require a lot of energy or a lot of sort of mental capacity to do. And I completely switched off from the show for those weeks that I was off, which I'd sort of always struggled to do before, because it was sort of like handing my baby over to someone, and in a way that parents will be like, "Oh, is everything okay at home?" And while they're out having their lovely meal or whatever, I was sort of would be doing that with the people who were covering me, being like, "Oh, is the show all right? Do you need any help?" And it's like, "You're off. You take some time off." So I was able to actually do that for the first time, really, since we launched the show a couple of years back now. And so I feel a lot better now than I did even just 2 months ago, and I think it goes to show, doesn't it, that sort of taking that time and doing that bit of self-care, and and spending some time where I went and just sat in a park. I took a couple of cans of beer and a little picnic, some sandwiches and some crisps and stuff, and went and just sat in the park and listened to some podcasts one afternoon in the sun, and it was just lovely to do and not have to worry about stuff. It was great.
I do really remember as well, it was maybe around that time, if that was a couple months ago, but you posted on Instagram a really honest post about how you were doing, and like and then I also saw a clip of you on your show talking about it, and it was really, really like great to see, just as a kind of viewer or a kind of consumer of the post on Instagram, because I think I commented on your thing like, this is what I want to see. Like, you were very transparent, and it wasn't that, I don't know, I feel like maybe there's a fear of showing your vulnerability, showing the kind of, like a weakness. But actually, I thought like, wow, that is so amazing that he's putting that out. And that's like so much strength in doing that.
And it was one of those that I sort of, when I first put a post up, so I put a picture up initially being like, look, I'm not okay. I've not been okay for a while, which I sort of typed out 2 or 3 times and then trashed it, and then was like, no, let's do it, and wrote it again. And there's that sort of as you say, there's that sort of fear sometimes of appearing to be vulnerable, and everything that I do with my show, with the way I hold myself when I go, even down to the way I sort of speak with my mates, I'm so conscious of how I am perceived by people. And I always have been. I've always sort of worried and sort of like, not panicked, because that makes it sound like I'm sort of a nervous wreck all the time with every new person I meet, which I'm not. But I sort of always wonder, I wonder what that person thinks of me, really. Or, Jack's been really lovely, but does Jack really like me? Like think I'm genuinely a nice guy, or is he just doing it because he wants me to be on his podcast? It's all those sort of things, and I don't think that at all, by the way. But there's a lot of that sort of thing that whirs around in my head all the time. And so I eventually posted it and was sort of overwhelmed by the response I got, really. And to the point where people started then sending stuff into my show through, I opened the door to my show to say, look, anyone who's making stuff, send it in. And people started making stuff about the post that I put up on Instagram. And someone had written a wonderful poem, a lady called Kerry had wrote a poem that she sent in about it's okay not to be okay. And it sort of struck me. I was like, Jesus, like, that's one Instagram post that I put out, but the ripple effect that it had was incredible. So I sat down with Pippa, who was working on my show as sort of a broadcast assistant that day, our sort of technical help that day. And I said, look, let's have a chat about sort of how we're doing through the pandemic and stuff, and just generally with mental health, because I live away from my family, she lived away from her family, and we spoke about it on the radio in a way that we were like, let's just be honest and speak about it. And then we had a chat with Kerry about how she saw the post and was moved to write this poem, because we put up these sort of polished versions of ourselves all the time, don't we? And I do it every evening when my mic goes live at 7:00 on the radio. I realise that I project this sort of like, hey, look at me, I'm having great fun doing the radio stuff. Hey, isn't it great? All these amazing people doing all these amazing things. But actually, I'm not that person all the time. And, sometimes I will still project that sort of, hey, we're having fun. And I could have had the shittest day, the most rubbish day. But that's why I sort of thought, you know what, enough is enough, because I don't see people being vulnerable enough. I don't see anyone doing posts like I did with that thing that I put up with that picture with the caption of me saying I've not been okay, but I'm getting there. and it's almost like I wanted it to have that in my feed. I wanted to see someone posting that, and I thought, well, if I'm feeling like this, maybe I could be that person for someone else.
Yeah, yeah, I've had very similar feelings in the sense of like what I want to actually see if I'm going to use social media and what I want to see in it, because I think it's very easy to get in cycles, and especially when you don't feel good about yourself, or you feel low, or your mental health's taken a massive hit. So you go in circles, and I've noticed it myself, and however much you don't want to, you either compare, or you think everybody else is having like a better time than you, or or not even a better time. It's like handling life better. Like, look, they've got everything balanced and sorted out. I'm just sitting here by myself. And actually, I feel like this. So the catalyst being like you post that, there's this domino effect. Well, you start realizing that people kind of like, oh no, that actually is how I've been feeling. I just didn't want to say, kind of like, and I don't know. It really taps into something that this sort of unsaid kind of thing, but that I feel like a good majority of people will like feel. Do you feel that as a guy as well, associated with mental health? Do you feel that comes into how you feel you can talk about it or express yourself? Like, is there a kind of, or how do you feel about the phrase toxic masculinity and what is associated with that?
So I don't really know what I think about this sort of term toxic masculinity, really. I don't think that I've necessarily grasped the whole sense of it. And I guess part of the reason for that, for me, is that I don't necessarily see myself as like a big masculine sort of macho, in a sort of stereotypical sort of, masculine way. I'm a guy with a hairy chest and a beard, and I'm quite a big set guy, but I'm not muscular. I'm not sort of going down and having a few beers and watching the football. Football doesn't interest me in the slightest. I don't do that sort of lads sort of thing, and so I really struggle with the sort of thing for me of identifying as overtly masculine in the sort of traditional sense of what masculinity might be. So I think that's probably one of the reasons why I don't sort of know or have a massive sort of knowledge of or an opinion on what toxic masculinity is or has an impact on. But what I do think is that, for me as a bloke, as a guy, I sometimes feel that I do have to be a certain way, that I don't think that, I don't feel like I could sit and have a cry at work where I know full well that if someone else had a cry at work, I would put my arm around them and, during normal times, of course, we're allowed to, and give them that support that we're allowed to, that we can give to people, that sort of human interaction. And I sort of think, well, if I feel like I could help another guy if they were crying and being upset at work, or a mate down the pub or whatever, why do I feel like I can't?
Yeah.
It's really weird, isn't it?
It's really weird. I definitely, I get what you mean about, because when you feel like you're not like a blokey bloke in a sense, or like it's like, because I'm definitely not that either, and
I'm not. I mean, I've got pretty pictures on my wall and all sorts.
Oh no,
so, that's like completely not.
I got fairy lights. I got.
Yeah, same.
Yeah,
I've got fairy lights.
We want some ambience. We want some, whatever the word is.
Look, you've even got plants to keep alive. You're responsible.
No, they're all fake.
Oh wow!
It's just lying. No, I can't keep any plants alive. I just forget. But yeah, it kind of. I think I asked that because I've noticed myself more and more in my life about the kind of just roles that, as a man, and again, not as a stereotypically big and masculine man, even that you kind of play. And so, like you say, to say cry at work, or to really just be, I suppose, very open and vulnerable in a public setting. It's not saying that all men have to be, but that you think, oh well, the kind of expectation is I'm going to act like this, so I will just fulfill that expectation.
Yeah, and I think that although I don't necessarily, like I say, think I'm masculine, I do think that I sometimes find myself conforming to that. Oh, I can't do that because people would think that I'm not me, or I'm not right, or I'm not man enough. Or so I guess in some ways I do identify with some of the traits that people might expect. I try and keep myself together, and I try and be that pillar to support people, and all those sort of traditional idealisms of being a man that perhaps people aspire to, maybe. I don't know. Or maybe, some people, and do I necessarily aspire to it? Or do I just do it because it's what I expected? I don't know. Honestly, don't know.
I think it's also important just to footnote in this conversation that it's not saying if everyone just talked about their feelings, then everything would be fine. Or if every man just was like open and vulnerable, everything would be fine. Because it's not that. It's But I think
if only it was that easy, though, right?
If only it was that easy, but life's not that easy. So but it's like, it's suddenly just realizing a bit more day to day, even that how you're kind of expected to act, or how you're expected to go about your normal business. And
and I think so many people will feel that pressure, won't they, and feel that they have to be and act a certain way. But I guess, in some ways, on reflection, do I sort of feel a lot of that is because of the sort of society that I grew up in, very working class, inner city Birmingham is where I grew up. So, with a sort of typical, mum, dad, younger brother, all of the sort of societal norms that, a kid that was born in the 80s would grow up with. And when I look at perhaps the way that particularly young people now are a lot more free to be who they are, and I also think that actually maybe I am just who I am, and I'm a bit sort of affected by that sort of social conditioning and the way that I've been brought up and grown up and all that sort of stuff. But it's just me.
Yeah. Well, Adam, honestly, it's always so lovely to talk to you. And thank you so much for giving me your time today.
Always a pleasure, Jack. Always here. You know that.